This week, YouTube has been taken over by monsters. Thank you to Ginny D and Pointy Hat for putting this together. The theme this time is all things fae. And if folklore is to be believed, fairies have very particular tastes. In stories from Ireland and across the British Isles, you're warned never to eat fairy food. Why? One bite and you may never find your way home. You would belong to them forever. But offerings, that's a different story. Cream, honey, butter, ripe fruit, all of those are said to win their favor. Now, I need all the help I can get, so today we are making a berry pavlova. Let's see if it's tempting enough for the fae. I am not necessarily a superstitious person. I am, however, a little stitious, because tell me why everything seemingly went wrong when I was working on this. First, I couldn't find my regular apron. I couldn't find my plain black apron. I couldn't find it. It wasn't in the pantry. It wasn't where I hung it. It wasn't in the wash. It wasn't in the dryer. It wasn't in the laundry. I could not find my black apron. So I am wearing this lovingly crafted apron that was put together by some friends of mine while we separate our egg whites and our egg yolks. We want 6 egg whites, room temperature. I'm using large eggs. Also, I'm going and doing them only 2 at a time because look what happened. I spaced out for 2 seconds and I cracked the whole egg into the bowl. Thankfully, the egg yolk did not burst. We don't want any egg yolk in our egg whites. You will not get them as fluffy as they need to be. We don't want any fat in these. And of course, we have to do the obligatory hand wash because we have egg on our fingers. But then I couldn't find my towel. I couldn't find the towel I used for my hands. I don't know where I just had it. I kid you not, I just had it. So it's fine. We're just off to a good start. So now we're going to start whipping up our egg whites. Our egg whites we need to get nice and foamy. We want soft peaks. It's going to take a couple minutes to get there, but we will get there. We will get there. I'm using my hand mixer. 1, it looks better on camera, and 2, it gives me an illusion of control. We're going to get these egg whites to soft peaks where they're nice and foamy and look like this, and then we're going to start incorporating our sugar. Now, recipes from Australia and New Zealand use castor sugar. That's not something that is readily available where I live, so we are going to use ultra-fine sugar instead, which really is the same thing. Americans just typically use granulated sugar in our baking recipes, so this will make sure that the meringue gets nice and fluffy and glossy, and it'll be beautiful. Though I will say my hand mixer was struggling and I was unwilling to relinquish control, so this went on longer than it probably should have before I transferred it to my stand mixer. But so I'm transferring this to my stand mixer. It had been about 15 minutes at this point and it still hadn't gotten to where I wanted it, so I thought I just needed a little more power for my motor. And so while we're doing this, we're also going to prep a cornstarch and white wine vinegar slurry. I'm using a teaspoon of cornstarch and a teaspoon of white wine vinegar, but I couldn't find my measuring spoons, and I had just washed them and I had put them in the drawer where I keep all of my measuring supplies, all my cups and all of that stuff, but they weren't there, and this is why I'm convinced that the fae are out to get me today. So once we get to stiff peaks, we're going to add our cornstarch slurry. We're going to beat that just long enough for it to get all mixed in there, and then we're going to divide it into 3. Now, you would think that we would just directly pipe this beautiful white meringue onto the silicone baking sheet, and in normal circumstances you would be correct, but this is Fae Week and I want to make this as appealing to the little Fae creatures as possible. So we are going to color our meringue, and I'm using all natural food coloring here. From left to right, we're using ube powder, raspberry powder, and butterfly pea flower powder. And we're just going to gently fold in the food coloring so that we don't collapse any of the meringue that we have built. Now we're going to pipe this onto our silicone baking sheet. I'm using a large star piping tip in a disposable piping bag. I just had scissors, but I couldn't find my scissors, and I just had them. And then finally I found them in a drawer I had been looking at the whole time. I had looked in that drawer. I had emptied the drawer, and then I found them, and then they didn't work. And this is why I was convinced that the fae were out to get me and that they did not want my little offering. I was convinced. So we're going to put those 3 colors in a larger piping bag fitted with that tip, and we're going to start swirling it around, and then it's going to explode and get everywhere. So we're going to then just use a spoon and shape it into a nice circle. And we're going to do it that way. But then there's a little bit left in the bag, and I was like, you know what? We'll just make the edges really cute. Maybe the fae will forgive us. So we're going to bake that at 245 for an hour, and then we're going to turn off the oven and let that cool in the oven for an hour. And then we're going to remove the pavlova from the oven and let it finish cooling completely at room temperature. Now it's a little crackly. That is okay. We're going to disguise it with a ton of whipped cream here in just a minute, but look how cute. You can't super well see it with the lighting that I had going on in the kitchen, but you could see the colorful swirls. So now we're gonna work on the whipped cream. The whipped cream can be made to personal preference, but I did want a lot of it, and I made mine a little on the less sweet side, and by a little bit, I mean very much not sweet at all, because the Pavlova itself is so sweet. It's a very, very sweet meringue. I didn't want to, you know, feel like my tongue was on fire from all of the sugar in the Pavlova. So we are going to beat the ever-living daylights out of our whipped cream. Then it's time to plate. So I originally tried to fit this on a plate that I use for most of my food photography, except it wasn't large enough, so I had to bring out my nice cutting board. So we're putting the Pavlova on the cutting board, and then we're going to top it with the whipped cream. It'll collapse just ever so slightly in the center, but that's just because of the sheer weight of all of the whipped cream. Right. I'm using an offset spatula to help spread that around, and then I had the thought, if I'm just gonna make it really pretty and swirly, why use an offset spatula, which is great for making things flat? Instead, I'll just use a regular spatula. So I went ahead and created all these little divots in the whipped cream. Now, we're going to be washing our fruit. I'm using blackberries and blueberries. I had originally thought about maybe putting some raspberries on there, but after seeing it in the lighting in the kitchen, I thought that it was just so pretty with all of the blue and purple tones that I didn't want to ruin that with raspberries. So we're going to then work on topping this with some edible flowers. These are pansies I grew in my garden, and they are so cute, and they just really lift this whole Pavlova from like mundane to mythical. And then it didn't stop there. I had the urge to top the extra whipped cream that was still exposed with edible pearls. Oh, it was so cute. It was so cute. I actually ran outside to get more of my pansies because I felt it just needed more. It just needed more. This was so much fun. This was so much fun. It was so cute. I'm just obsessed. I'm just absolutely obsessed with this. And I put in some of the green little leaves. Fun fact, pansies are entirely edible. The stem, the leaves, the flowers, it's all edible. But look how beautiful it is. Look how magical. The pearls, the flowers, the leaves. I'm feeling emotional about how beautiful this was. It wasn't photographed well on camera, but in person you could see like the swirls of color. If we zoom in right here, you can see like there's bands of pink and purple and blue, but it was much more vibrant in person. And then, talking of vibrant, when we cut this open, something about the way the Pavlova cooked made the inside far more colorful. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to get a good photo because the weight of the whipped cream and the berries smushed the Pavlova when I cut it open and pulled pieces off. So you're just gonna have to trust me on that. But oh my gosh, it was so beautiful, and it tasted incredible. The meringue, I was right to trust my gut with reducing the amount of sugar in the whipped cream because yes, the meringue was very, 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 very sweet. It was almost too sweet for me, even with the extremely plain whipped cream. It was almost too much for me. There's a threshold, there's a limit on the amount of sugar that I can taste before it just becomes uncomfortable and like cloyingly sweet, and I'm really, really glad that I did not sweeten the whipped cream that much. The tartness from the fruit also helped. If you're gonna do something with like sweeter fruit like bananas or apples or like something like a very, very, very ripe strawberry, I would reduce the sugar even further. I would almost say just make it plain, just no sweetener in the whipped cream, because the meringue is sweet enough for all of it. But that is the end of the episode. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you again to Ginny D and Pointy Hat for creating Monster Week and selecting this week as Fae Week. If you haven't already, like the video. Make sure you comment down below. Do you think I was a victim of the Fae? Because I think I was a victim of the Fae. And also what you would like to see next time. I do have plans for one more Fae Week video coming up, and it's gonna be super, super fun. And I'm very, 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 very excited. I'm gonna start working on that literally the day this is posted because it's gonna be quite a large project. Subscribe if you're not subscribed, and ring the bell for notifications so you're the first to know when new videos go live. Adventurers, thank you so much for watching. As always, take care of yourselves, do something nice for someone else, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.